On the 20th of March, the Israel Defense Forces at a newly established checkpoint on a coastal road 4 kilometers north of UNIFIL Nakura headquarters fired warning shots at the UNIFIL patrol. The rear UNIFIL vehicle was impacted by one round. On the patrol's return, an Israel Defense Forces tank at the same checkpoint fired a main armament round, which impacted 15 meters from the UNIFIL vehicle, causing a puncture. On the 30th of March, a UNIFIL patrol near Dair Kanun Anna in Sector West was subjected to a heavy small arms fire from a group of approximately 20 individuals blocking the road. An explosion next to the patrol vehicles was also reported. The patrol returned fire and disengaged, returning to Nakura headquarters. Thankfully, these attacks did not lead to injuries. We say it clearly, and has been a need to say it far too often. Peacekeepers must never be a target. All acts that endanger the peacekeepers must immediately stop. All actors must adhere to their obligations to ensure the safety and security of the peacekeepers at all times. The inviolability of the United Nations installations must be respected. I wish to acknowledge and applaud the extraordinary commitment and courage of the women and men of UNIFIL implementing Security Council mandate tasks in these extremely dangerous conditions as far as the security circumstances allow. And I express my deepest gratitude to them. Mr. President, since Hezbollah on the 2nd of March claimed an attack on Israel, the group has conducted daily strikes, including with rockets, missiles, and drones at targets in Israel and the occupied Syrian Golan. UNIFIL continues to report hundreds of launches from the mission's area of operations, which demonstrates the presence of unauthorized armed personnel, assets, and weapons south of the Litani River, in clear violation of Resolution 1701. As reported earlier, the Israel Defense Forces have issued displacement orders for the entire UNIFIL area of operations and can continue to conduct intensified daily strikes, also in violation of Resolution 1701. Politicians in Israel now openly speak of the intention of an extended so-called security or buffer zone with the destruction of villages along the Blue Line and several bridges across the Litani River. In the last week only, thousands of trajectories were observed in both directions, as well as attacks by fighter aircraft and unmanned aerial vehicles. The Israel Defense Forces are advancing deeper into Lebanon, and clashes have been observed, including in very close proximity to UNIFIL headquarters in Nakura, which has been the subject of multiple impacts. The Lebanese armed forces, despite staying out of the conflict, have suffered casualties. On Monday, one Lebanese armed forces soldier was killed and several others injured at the checkpoint on the road between Nakura and Teya. Mr. President, faced with immense pressure, including intensified exchanges of fire, direct attacks, obstructions of movement, and resupply, UNIFIL continuously reassesses the force's posture to mitigate risks, strengthening force protection, reducing footprint, and adjusting operational activities. UNIFIL continues constant contact with the parties to avoid misunderstandings, de-conflict, and de-escalate where possible. UNIFIL's current focus includes ensuring safety of its personnel and helping facilitate humanitarian access to affected communities in the area. Peacekeepers, in close coordination with the Lebanese armed forces, have delivered essential supplies, including food, medicine, and hygiene kits, to civilians who remain living in precarious conditions in hard-to-reach areas near the Blue Line. Mr. President, as UNIFIL continues to face these extreme challenges amid continuing intensified hostilities, our efforts to support the parties to fully implement Resolution 1701 are critical. In this exceptionally dangerous period, the Council's strong and unified backing for UNIFIL and its peacekeepers is not merely important, it is indispensable. The women and men serving under this mandate, a mandate from this Council, must know that this Council stands firmly behind them. We are sincerely grateful to the troop contributing countries that remain united and committed to UNIFIL and the implementation of its mandate. Only the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 by both parties will enable a long-term solution to the conflict. We urge all parties to recommit to the resolution and work meaningfully toward that end. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I thank Mr. Lacroix for his briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Hiari.
Mr. President, amid the wider escalation across the Middle East, the situation in Lebanon continues to deteriorate drastically. Since the last emergency meeting of this Council on Lebanon on 11 of March and the close consultation held on 17 of March, Hezbollah and Israel have both expanded the scale and scope of their military operations. With heavy exchanges of fire across the Blue Line, strikes across Lebanon, and intensified clashes amidst an increased deployment of Israel Defense Forces deeper inside Lebanon. This is taking a devastating toll on civilians and civilian infrastructure, particularly in Lebanon. As of 30 March, the Lebanese authorities report that over 1,240 people have been killed and 3,680 wounded. Over 1.1 million people have been displaced. The World Health Organization has also documented numerous attacks on healthcare since early March, resulting in deaths and injuries among medical personnel. The Undersecretary General for
Ozen. Untuk kamu si paling aktif yang gak mau kehilangan momen seru, atasi alergimu dengan Ozen. Obat alergi praktis yang cepat redakan alergimu. Ozen, obatnya orang Indonesia dari Faros.
Been destroyed, which the IDF alleges were used by Hezbollah for transporting weapons and fighters. In northern Israel, fatalities, destruction, displacement, and widespread panic have returned. Mr. President, on 29 of March, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced, quote, the expansion of the security buffer zone in order to permanently neutralize the threat of invasion and to push anti-tank missile fire away from northern Israel, end quote. This follows the 24th March announcement by Israel Defense Minister Katz declaring Israel's intention to control a so-called security zone in southern Lebanon up to the Litani River until the threat of Hezbollah is removed. The Lebanese government has repeatedly condemned Israel's continued violations of Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity. President Aoun has reaffirmed Lebanon's readiness to engage in direct negotiations with Israel under international auspices. While the Lebanese government has taken commendable steps to address non-state arms, two things are true at once. The government needs time and space, not under fire, to implement its decisions. And more assertive actions, extending beyond the military realm, are needed to bring a state monopoly on arms into being. But Hezbollah not only blatantly rejects the decisions by the Lebanese government, but also actively defies them. As well as rejecting the government decision to outlaw its activities, Hezbollah has made its capacity to undermine civil coexistence abundantly clear. This is a dangerous rhetoric when civil tensions are on the rise in Lebanon. Nonetheless, Lebanese authorities have asserted that while they are not calling for a confrontation with Hezbollah, they intend to persevere with either their plans to extend state authority across the country and have urged the group to respect government decisions. Mr. President, the United Nations continue to call on all sides to avail themselves of diplomatic channels, stop the hostilities, and recommit to the full implementation of Resolution 1701. The United Nations has been exercising its good offices at all levels, including through the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, calling for de-escalation, respect for international law, protection of civilians, and an immediate cessation of hostilities. Mr. President, there is no military solution. Only diplomacy, dialogue, and the full implementation of the UN Charter and Security Council resolutions can lead to a sustainable peace for all. This is a pathway to spare communities on both sides of the Blue Line more needless suffering. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Harari for his statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Tom Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. President, Ambassadors, Excellencies. I appreciate the opportunity to brief the Council from Beirut, where I arrived last night to find anxiety, tension, and despondency at levels I have not witnessed in many years working in and on Lebanon. The gravity of this moment, as described by my colleagues, was of course forefront in my meetings today with President Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, and I will discuss the moment further with Speaker Berry tomorrow. I've heard again in my meetings the courageous call for dialogue with Israel for implementation of UNSCR 1701 and for full state authority over arms. Yet even now, the sounds of the airstrikes in the Beirut suburbs not far from here can be heard, and the hum of drones has been constant. As you heard from USG Lacroix and ASG Khari, today's discussion is therefore urgent. The situation on both sides of the blue line demands not only the Council's closest attention, but also your collective action to avert an even worse crisis. I join my colleagues in mourning the recent deaths of 3 UN peacekeepers. Since I last briefed you on the 11th of March, the humanitarian consequences of the latest regional escalation have grown even more acute across Lebanon. Over the past 4 weeks, more than 1,240 people have been killed, including 87 women and 124 children. Some 52 first responders are among those killed, and another 3,500 people have been injured. Hostilities continue across southern Lebanon, across Beirut's southern suburbs, the Dahiyeh, and parts of the Bekaa. Hundreds of thousands of civilians remain in harm's way, especially with military advances flattening entire villages. Meanwhile, rockets continue to be fired indiscriminately by Hezbollah over the blue line into northern Israel, causing harm and fear among civilians there. In Lebanon, more than 1.1 million people have been displaced over the past 4 weeks, including more than 370,000 children. Over 200,000 people have crossed into Syria in the past month. A cycle of coercive displacement is unfolding. Displacement on this scale, of course, heightens exposure to additional dangers, particularly for women and girls living in overcrowded and unfamiliar settings. I saw the impact of that myself this morning. Lebanese and Syrian families I spoke to talked of deep uncertainty, their resilience stretched thin, growing frustration at being unable to return home safely. Many Lebanese families described fleeing fighting in 2024, only to do so again in 2026. I met Syrians displaced many times since 2013, recounting their latest upheaval. People told me consistently that displacement is not a solution, but a painful last resort for them, a temporary way to preserve their dignity while they wait for conditions that allow them to go back to their villages and neighborhoods. Above all, they asked us not to reduce their suffering to numbers. They want their lives, their losses, and their hopes to be seen and to be heard. Mr. President, even before this latest violence, tens of thousands remain displaced, and entire communities were surviving with only partial access to healthcare, water, electricity, education. The current escalation is compounding a situation that is already critical. 51 primary healthcare centers and 4 hospitals are currently closed due to hostilities, with others damaged or operating at reduced capacity. Schools and public universities are being used as shelters, leaving thousands of children without access to learning. 6 of the 8 bridges south of the Litani River have now been destroyed, and more vital infrastructure is under attack. Essential access routes have been damaged. Growing constraints hinder civilians' ability to move to safety and humanitarian partners' ability to reach those most in need. Entire communities are becoming increasingly isolated. International humanitarian law is clear. Civilians, wherever they are, in Israel and in Lebanon, must be protected. This includes allowing them to move away from the dangers of hostilities to safer areas. Essential infrastructure and basic services, healthcare, water, electricity, on which civilians depend, must also and always be spared. This is what the fundamental principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution demand of all parties. And of course, the work of medical personnel, first responders, and humanitarians must always be facilitated, not impeded. Mr. President, we're making a concerted attempt to meet this moment. On the 13th of March, together with the government of Lebanon, we launched a $308 million flash appeal to provide life-saving support to up to 1 million. Thanks to all the donors who have responded so far with support, especially in such a difficult moment for global funding. We've received $94 million so far, including a third of that from OCHA, and the appeal continues, rallying funds for life-saving support, even as so much more is still needed. In the last 4 weeks, we've scaled up our humanitarian operations, delivering 2.8 million hot and cold meals to help ensure adequate sustenance. I saw myself this morning 3,000 of those meals ready for distribution. Non-food support has also grown to keep pace with large populations on the move. More than 122,000 thermal blankets, 99,000 mattresses, nearly 50,000 sleeping mats have been provided. 58,000 hygiene kits, 26,000 menstrual hygiene kits have also been distributed. Humanitarian partners have delivered more than 875,000 litres of bottled drinking water, 15,000 cubic metres of trucked water. Fuel has been supplied to sustain water services for 412,000 people. Mr. President, in my short time back in Lebanon, the message from communities here is painfully clear. They want safety, they want dignity, they want this to stop. They want to escape this cycle of crises. And they look to members of this council to heed these calls. We have often said that we cannot let Lebanon fail. Now is a real test of that promise. Lebanon is often said to be at breaking point, yet so often finds the resilience somehow to pull through. Now it is once again at breaking point. So I have 3 messages for the Lebanese people. First, continue to respond with generosity to your fellow Lebanese. You are the humanitarian front lines right now. I know that you will meet this moment. Second, retain a commitment to national identity. You must rise above the forces that seek to divide you. And third, don't give up on the idea of Lebanon. If coexistence fails here, it stands to fail everywhere. And finally, Mr. President, my 3 asks for this council. First, given the trajectory that some Israeli ministers have described, and given what we have seen in plain sight in Gaza, how will you protect civilians? Secondly, given the intensity of the coercive displacement that we are seeing, how should we prepare collectively as the international community for a new addition to the list of occupied territories? And thirdly, given the political tension here in Lebanon and the fragility of political structures, how should we prepare for the potential terror of a fresh round of internal targeting and political strife? These questions are daunting. They are not easy. They are challenging, but they are precisely the kind of questions that the Security Council and the United Nations must confront if we too are to meet this moment. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Fletcher for his statement. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, avec l'Indonésie, la France a demandé la tenue de cette réunion d'urgence à la suite des attaques gravissimes, inacceptables et injustifiables que les casques bleus de la FINUL ont subies ces derniers jours. Ces attaques s'inscrivent dans le prolongement d'une série d'autres attaques et incidents similaires observés lors des derniers mois que la France a condamnés avec fermeté à plusieurs reprises. Cette situation ne saurait durer. Aussi, Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie d'avoir organisé cette réunion dès ce matin et je remercie pour leurs exposés Monsieur le secrétaire général adjoint aux opérations de paix, Monsieur Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Monsieur le secrétaire général adjoint aux affaires humanitaires Tom Fletcher et monsieur le sous-secrétaire général pour les affaires politiques Khaled Kiari pour leurs exposés, leurs remarques, leurs observations et leurs demandes au Conseil. 3 casques bleus indonésiens sont morts dans les dernières 48 heures. 3 soldats de la paix, engagés au service de la communauté internationale, tués dans l'exercice de leur mission au Liban. La France leur rend hommage. Elle exprime aux familles des victimes, à l'Indonésie, sa solidarité la plus profonde et ses condoléances les plus sincères. Elle exprime sa reconnaissance à l'ONU, aux soldats qui maintiennent la paix avec le casque bleu. Elle souhaite un prompt rétablissement au personnel blessé. Elle salue aussi le professionnalisme, le courage, l'engagement de tous les personnels onusiens au Sud-Liban et partout dans le monde. Elle réaffirme son soutien au mandat de la FINUL, qui doit pouvoir l'exercer pleinement, sans entrave, jusqu'à sa fin telle que prévue par la résolution 2790. Des incidents graves ont également été commis par Israël à l'encontre du contingent français à Nakoura, en particulier à l'encontre du chef d'état-major de la force. Des soldats israéliens ont fait preuve d'une attitude agressive, d'intimidation et d'atteinte à la sécurité des personnels du contingent français, alors même que les procédures de déconfliction avaient été dûment respectées. La France condamne avec fermeté ces menaces directes à l'encontre de ces personnels engagés au sein de la FINUL. Elle l'a fait savoir aux autorités israéliennes. Toute la lumière devra être faite sans délai sur ces actes. Monsieur le Président, ce Conseil ne peut se contenter de condamner, il doit agir pour que ces actes ne se reproduisent plus. La protection des casques bleus est une obligation du droit international qui s'impose à tous. Cela nous a été rappelé par nos briefeurs. Nous attendons d'Israël des garanties concrètes et immédiates. Les procédures de déconfliction existent et doivent être respectées par toutes les parties sans exception. Chaque jour, les casques bleus de la FINUL doivent faire face aux risques de tirs, des mines et des engins explosifs improvisés alors qu'ils mettent en œuvre le mandat qui leur a été confié. De tels actes sont inacceptables et injustifiables. La France appelle à nouveau Israël et le Hezbollah à respecter la sécurité des casques bleus. Quiconque met en danger les personnels onusiens porte une responsabilité devant ce Conseil et devant la communauté internationale tout entière. Monsieur le Président, ces décès ne peuvent être dissociés de l'intensification de la guerre au Liban. Les populations civiles en payent l'insupportable prix. Au Liban, plus de 1200 morts et 3500 blessés en moins d'un mois, dont des enfants, personnels de santé et journalistes. 1 Libanais sur 4 déplacés dans des conditions d'une extrême difficulté, malgré le volontarisme des autorités libanaises, avec l'appui résolu de la communauté internationale, dont celui de la France. En Israël, une population contrainte de se réfugier plusieurs fois par jour dans les abris, dans des délais d'à peine plus de 15 secondes. Pour sortir de la guerre, la voie est connue. C'est la pleine mise en œuvre de la résolution 1701 et le recours à l'accord de cessez-le-feu de novembre 24, avec l'appui du mécanisme de surveillance américano-français qui en procède. Cela exige, d'une part, qu'Israël renonce à toute intervention terrestre d'envergure et à toute occupation du territoire libanais qui ne ferait qu'éloigner la perspective d'une paix durable. Cela exige, d'autre part, que le Hezbollah mette un terme à ses attaques et qu'il remette ses armes à l'État libanais, conformément à la décision prise courageusement par le gouvernement libanais le 2 mars. Le Hezbollah doit cesser de prendre en otage le peuple libanais au service d'une guerre menée par l'Iran contre Israël, guerre que nous condamnons absolument. L'Iran doit également se conformer aux décisions prises souverainement par les autorités libanaises, dont celle d'exiger le départ de l'ambassadeur d'Iran au Liban à compter du 29 mars. Une solution diplomatique est possible pour s'engager dans la voie de la paix. La France y travaille et nous poursuivons nos échanges avec les autorités libanaises et israéliennes pour parvenir à une désescalade susceptible d'ouvrir le chemin de négociations directes. Dans ce contexte, nous saluons et soutenons les décisions courageuses prises par l'exécutif libanais s'agissant du renforcement de la souveraineté du Liban et son ouverture inédite à des discussions directes avec Israël. Il s'agit d'une opportunité historique dont la France invite à se saisir sans délai afin d'arriver à un règlement durable du conflit dans l'intérêt de toutes les parties. La France se tient prête à faciliter ces échanges en étroite collaboration avec ses partenaires. C'est dans cette perspective que le ministre français des Affaires étrangères s'est rendu il y a quelques jours à Beyrouth et à Jérusalem. Mais pour parvenir à cette solution, plusieurs préalables, le respect de l'ONU, le respect des personnels de la FINUL, le respect du droit international, y compris du droit international humanitaire et des populations civiles, et l'arrêt des hostilités au plus vite. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also wish to thank USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Chiari for their briefings. Colleagues, we gather today at a moment of profound sorrow and grave concern as the ongoing conflagration in Lebanon has not spared UNIFIL's blue helmets. Fully echoing the Secretary General's latest statement, Greece strongly condemns the recent killing of 3 Indonesian UNIFIL peacekeepers amidst heavy firing. We express our condolences to the families of the fallen peacekeepers and to our Indonesian colleagues. The incident is tragically added to a series of violent attacks against UN personnel, including the injuring of Ghanaian blue helmets earlier this month and a Polish one a couple of days ago. Attacks against UN personnel are unacceptable. They constitute grave violations of international humanitarian law and of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and must immediately stop. The safety and security of peacekeepers is non-negotiable. We call for a thorough investigation and accountability for this incident. Mr. President, Lebanon continues to pay the price of a conflict it neither chose nor can afford. We strongly condemn once again Hezbollah's attacks in support of the Iranian regime against Israel, which triggered a dangerous round of regional escalation. These attacks severely undermine the Lebanese government's efforts to restore its exclusive control over arms across the country. Restoring the state monopoly over arms throughout the country is an essential prerequisite for sustainable peace and security for Lebanon, Israel, and the region. In this regard, we commend the historic and courageous decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to ban Hezbollah's military activities. This is a step in the right direction, demonstrating the Lebanese government's willingness to deal with outstanding issues and deserves the full support of the international community. Lebanon should not stand alone. Greece fully supports the efforts of President Aoun and of the Lebanese government to forge strong state institutions. Empowering the LAF is essential for ensuring Lebanese sovereignty. Greece already bilaterally assists Lebanon, including the LAF, and we stand ready to participate in the international conference in Paris as soon as conditions allow. We also recognize Israel's right to self-defense. Communities in northern Israel have suffered terribly due to Hezbollah's attacks since October 2023. However, any further escalation must be avoided. We call for a maximum restraint, and we are opposed to protracted ground operations. The expansion of Israel's military operations into Beirut and across Lebanon's territory aggravates the already fragile security situation. Greece reaffirms its support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence of Lebanon. Full respect for Resolution 1701 and the November 2024 ceasefire agreement is essential in this regard. Mr. President, civilians are bearing the heaviest burden of this crisis. More than 1 million people have been displaced, many lives have perished, and thousands have been severely injured. The risk of broader regional destabilization, including of additional refugee flows, is growing. Civilian infrastructure, including airports, ports, and bridges across the country, do not constitute legitimate targets. Journalists, humanitarian and health care workers must be protected at all times and in all circumstances. We also express our condolences to the families of the victims and our solidarity to those impacted by this war. International humanitarian law must be upheld by all parties, everywhere and at all times. Standing in full solidarity with the Lebanese people, Greece immediately responded to OCHA's flash appeal, allocating a substantial financial contribution. We are also finalizing our contribution to strengthening Lebanon's health sector. At the same time, the tireless efforts of humanitarian actors on the ground, including UN agencies in UNRWA, cannot be overlooked. Their work under extremely difficult and dangerous conditions is indispensable as it is commendable. Mr. President, any further escalation risks the lives of civilians who have not opted for this conflict. It endangers UN personnel who are striving to uphold peace and at the risk of their own safety. And it severely undermines Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity and political independence, which we strive to preserve. We commend the willingness of the Lebanese leadership to pursue direct political negotiations with Israel. This is a moment for responsibility and de-escalation. Lebanon deserves a future of peace, security, and dignity, free from external interference and internal division. Greece will stand by its side in that effort. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Mr. President, allow me to begin by thanking you for convening this meeting on such a short notice. And I also thank France and Indonesia for requesting this meeting in light of UNIFIL casualties and the grave and escalatory situation in Lebanon. I thank USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher and ASG Carey for their briefings. Latvia strongly condemned the attacks on UNIFIL, resulting in the death of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers and injuries to several other peacekeepers. And we express our deepest condolences to the Republic of Indonesia. Our thoughts are with the injured and the loved ones of the deceased. We call for a robust and timely investigation to determine the perpetrators of the attacks. We call for the accountability of these blatant violations of international humanitarian law. The safety and security of UN personnel and property is not optional. It must be respected by all sides at all times. Deliberate attacks on peacekeepers are grave violations of international humanitarian law and may constitute war crimes. We call upon all members of this Council to continue stressing the crucial importance of upholding commitments agreed in Security Council Resolutions 2518 and 2730. We commend the exceptional service of UNIFIL as it continues to implement its mandate under Resolution 1701 and providing assistance to the local population even in the direst of circumstances. All essential personnel, including those from my own country, are still on duty in the midst of hostilities. The threats to safety and security of UNIFIL peacekeepers have clearly reached a threshold which demands further reflection by the UN and the mission's leadership on how to prevent further casualties while continuing to implement its mandate. The latest incidents demonstrate the current military escalation in Lebanon has serious consequences for all: the civilian populations, the humanitarian personnel, and for UN peacekeepers. Even clearly recognizable UN peacekeepers become targets when the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution are discarded. The ongoing conflict undermines the stability in the region and the global security. We express concern about the humanitarian crisis caused by mass displacement in Lebanon and inflow into Syria. Over 1 million people forcibly displaced, of which 370,000 are children. 3,700 injured, over 1,200 deaths. Hezbollah has dragged the people of Lebanon into a war they have no part in. Iran must stop enabling Hezbollah's military activities and armed hostilities. Hezbollah must immediately stop all aggressive actions against Israel and disarm. The Lebanese government has clearly taken a stand against the malign influence of Hezbollah and Iran in their country. We commend the Lebanese government's decision of 2nd of March to declare all Hezbollah military and security activities illegal in the whole territory of Lebanon. And we also welcome the political commitment of the Lebanese government to extend its authorities throughout the country and the implementation of the disarmament plan. Continued international support in these efforts remains essential. We call upon Israel to abstain from attacks against civilian infrastructure and heavily populated areas, and to respect the Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity. All parties must respect international law, including international humanitarian law, and ensure the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. Mr. President, the hostilities around the Blue Line continue to escalate, claiming the lives of civilians and UNIFIL peacekeepers with increasing frequency. International humanitarian law is being ignored. We call on all parties to the conflict to fully respect the Security Council Resolution 1701, de-escalate and work towards peace. For generations, the Lebanese people have suffered from armed conflict. Lebanon, yet again, finds itself on the brink. And we continue to start by Lebanon and its people. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank U.S.
Semua orang lagi kepanasan. Belum gajian kepanasan. Diputusin kepanasan. Kota ini butuh vitamin damkas. Kota ini butuh vitamin pemadam kepanasan.
Si jeruk siap memadamkan kepanasan. Juaranya vitamin yang nyegeri. Nutrisari penuhi 100% kebutuhan vitamin C tiap hari. Jeruk kau minum jeruk. Pemadam kepanasan. Nutrisari.
Incident strikes at the very heart of international law, UN peacekeeping, and the international community's collective commitment to the maintenance of international peace and security. But we know that these are not isolated incidents, but part of a disturbing pattern of attacks on UNIFIL. As USG Lacroix also noted, UNIFIL has been subjected to a persistent aggressive behavior and restrictions on freedom of oppression. The Council must not allow such violence against peacekeepers to become normalized. These missions are mandated by the Security Council, and their protection is the Council's foremost responsibility. As one of the largest troop contributing countries, Pakistan, having lost 182 peacekeepers in the line of duty, we share this profound sense of loss. We stand in full solidarity with the government and people of Indonesia, as well as with the families of the fallen peacekeepers, whose sacrifice reflects the immense risks undertaken in service of international peace and security. And we wish full and speedy recovery to the injured peacekeepers. President, attacks against peacekeepers are unacceptable and may constitute war crimes under international law. UN personnel are impartial agents of peace. Targeting them is a grave violation that undermines international humanitarian law. The failure to ensure the safety of UN personnel undermines the credibility of this Council of peacekeeping, international law, and the collective commitment of the international community to maintain peace and protect civilians. In this regard, accountability is essential, and those responsible must be brought to justice. Pakistan calls for a prompt, thorough, transparent, and impartial investigation to establish the facts. The safety and security of peacekeepers and UN premises must be fully ensured at all times in full accordance with international law. Pakistan deeply appreciates the vital role of UNIFIL in carrying out its mandate in a complex and high-risk environment while maintaining peace and stability along the Blue Line. Full freedom of movement of its personnel must be guaranteed. Recent artillery shelling, airstrikes, and drone attacks have increased hostile incidents against UNIFIL peacekeepers in clear violation of international law. This incident must also be viewed within the broader context. Israel's continued military actions in southern Lebanon have resulted in the death of more than 600 civilians, displacement of more than 1 million people, and widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure. Ongoing fighting and hostilities are further exacerbating the humanitarian situation and heightening risks to both civilians and peacekeepers. These developments are undermining the Lebanese government's bold steps, policy decisions, and serious commitment to peace and stability. We must not allow this. The Council must extend its full support to Lebanon. We urge all parties to adhere to their obligations under Security Council Resolution 1701 and the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement of November 2024. Full compliance with these commitments is essential to prevent further escalation and to restore stability in the region. In this context, we also call for full respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. And Pakistan stands firmly with the government and people of Lebanon. President, in the light of the evolving and deeply concerning situation in the region, we stress that further escalation must be avoided at all costs. We call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint. The ultimate objective must be urgent de-escalation, restraint, and a complete cessation of all hostilities and a peaceful resolution of all issues to prevent further deterioration of the regional security environment. This Council, we believe, must fully espouse and advance that objective. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Undersecretary Lacroix, Undersecretary Fletcher, and Assistant Secretary General Khiari for their informative and alarming briefings. We also thank France and Indonesia for calling this urgent meeting, which we agree is both necessary and timely. Recent days' events illustrate how fragile and dangerous the situation in Lebanon has become, and how crucial it is to prevent further escalation for the civilians of Lebanon and Israel alike. Mr. President, we condemn in the strongest possible terms the attacks on UNIFIL, which in the past 2 days have caused the deaths of 3 peacekeepers and the serious injuries of others. We look forward to the results of UNIFIL's full and thorough investigation into these incidents. Peacekeepers are clearly protected under international humanitarian law, and any deliberate targeting against peacekeepers is unacceptable. Denmark extends its deepest condolences to the families of those killed, as well as to the government and people of Indonesia. We wish a speedy recovery for those injured. The brave women and men of UNIFIL serve under the UN flag in the pursuit of peace. They are the embodiment of multilateral solidarity and cooperation in action, and these incidents represent a direct attack on these principles. We commend UNIFIL for its continuous work despite the extremely challenging circumstances, and stress our unwavering support for the mission. Mr. President, as we've said before, we strongly condemn Hezbollah's continued attacks against Israel, which has dragged Lebanon into yet another unwanted war and must stop immediately. Denmark is concerned about the significant humanitarian and civilian consequences of Israel's military operations in Lebanon, and underlines that all military actions must be conducted with full respect for international humanitarian law, including the principles of proportionality, distinction, and precaution. The protection of civilians must be ensured, and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief must be facilitated. Recent statements by, for instance, the Israeli finance minister about the intention to move the Lebanese-Israeli border to the Litani River are deeply concerning. This area makes up 1/10 of Lebanon's territory, is home to hundreds of thousands of Lebanese, and includes cities with a rich and diverse cultural heritage. We strongly urge Israel to refrain from any large-scale ground invasion or long-term occupation of Lebanese territory that risk escalating the hostilities beyond control. This includes withdrawing its forces from occupied areas in Lebanon, in line with the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. Denmark calls for respect for Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence in line with resolutions 1701 and 1559. Hezbollah must cease all attacks on Israel and respects the Lebanese state's exclusive authority over all arms and military activity. The Lebanese government has taken unprecedented steps in its efforts to disarm Hezbollah. We fully support the government's efforts in this regard. Mr. President, with reports of 1.1 million displaced in Lebanon, including over 350,000 children, and more than 1,200 killed, including many civilians, the humanitarian situation is quickly reaching unmanageable levels. The majority of the displaced lack formal shelter, protection, food, and medical services. Humanitarian access to the south is significantly restricted for an estimated 150,000 people. Denmark condemns all attacks directed at civilians and civilian infrastructure, including first responders and healthcare personnel. Since March 2nd, we've seen 87 attacks on healthcare in Lebanon, resulting in more than 50 deaths among healthcare personnel and many more wounded. This must stop. Denmark recalls resolutions 2286 and 2730 on the protection of medical staff and facilities and the protection of humanitarian workers. We urge all parties to fully respect their obligations under international humanitarian law, uphold these resolutions, and ensure that all civilians, including medical staff and humanitarian workers, are protected and do not become the targets of attacks. Denmark also expresses our deep concern over the reported attacks on journalists and recall that civilians must be protected under international humanitarian law. Mr. President, in closing, as the situation in the region continues to escalate and the path to stability cannot be selective, but must be comprehensive. We must not allow developments in Lebanon to be overshadowed by other events. We must collectively and strongly insist on de-escalation. Around this table, we must do all within our power to this urgent end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, and my own country, Somalia. We thank USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Khiari for their comprehensive briefings. The A3 expresses its grave concern regarding the recent escalations of hostilities in southern Lebanon and joins the Secretary General in condemning the attacks against the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, which have resulted in the killing and injury of Indonesian peacekeepers. We extend our deepest condolences to the families of the victims, to Indonesia, and the troop contributing countries of the United Nations. We pay tribute to all peacekeepers who risk their lives in the service of international peace and security. Targeting United Nations peacekeepers is unacceptable and constitutes a serious violation of international law and relevant Security Council resolutions, including Resolution 1701. The safety and security of United Nations personnel and premises are not negotiable and must be respected at all times. Under no circumstances should peacekeepers be subject to any hostile acts, and those responsible for these attacks must be held accountable. Mr. President, the A3 is deeply concerned by the continual deterioration of the security situation along the Blue Line and the increasing toll on civilian populations, including civilian casualties, destruction of infrastructure, and large-scale displacement. We reiterate the urgent need to ensure the protection of civilians and full respect for international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The A3 reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and political unity of Lebanon. Lebanon must not become an arena for proxy confrontations or broader geopolitical tensions. Respect for the sovereignty of states and the principle of non-interference remain essential to preserving regional stability. Mr. President, the A3 calls on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and to refrain from actions that could further inflame tensions or destabilize the situation. We stress the importance of returning to the cessation of hostilities arrangements of 26 November of 2024 and ensuring that the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 as the primary framework for maintaining stability and preventing renewed conflict. Dialogue and diplomacy remain the only viable path to preventing further deterioration of the situation. We acknowledge the critical role played by UNIFIL in supporting stability, facilitating dialogue, and contributing to de-escalation along the Blue Line. The mission remains an essential instrument for confidence building and conflict prevention. We reiterate our full support for UNIFIL and express appreciation to troop contributing countries for their continued commitment. We also emphasize the importance of continued support to the Lebanese state institutions, including the Lebanese armed forces, to enable them to effectively assume their responsibilities in maintaining security and stability throughout Lebanese territory. To conclude, Mr. President, the A3 stands in solidarity with the people of Lebanon and reiterates its support for all efforts aimed at preserving stability, preventing regional spillover, and achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East in accordance with international law and the Charter of the United Nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Panamá agradece la convocatoria de esta sesión informativa, así como la información compartida por los expositores, subsecretario Jean-Pierre Lacroix, secretario general asistente Khaled Chiari y subsecretario Tom Fletcher, en sus presentaciones informativas, que evidencian que la situación en el Líbano continúa deteriorándose de manera alarmante. Reconocemos la presencia de los representantes del Líbano, Israel, Indonesia y Polonia, que nos distinguen con su participación. Han transcurrido ya 20 días desde la última reunión de este Consejo y lejos de observarse una desescalada, la situación en el territorio libanés, incluidos continuos bombardeos y combates, ha deteriorado de manera significativa, con un aumento en las consecuencias humanitarias. Panamá reitera su condena a Hezbollah por los ataques y las acciones irresponsables que han desencadenado la actual espiral de violencia. De acuerdo con la información más reciente de la Oficina de Coordinación de Asuntos Humanitarios, OCHA, desde el 2 de marzo se han registrado más de 3.900 incidentes de hostilidades, con al menos 1.100 personas fallecidas, incluidos decenas de mujeres y niños, y más de 3.200 heridos. Más de 1 millón de personas han sido desplazadas, de las cuales más de 136.000 se encuentran en refugios colectivos, mientras que más de 189.000 han cruzado hacia Siria, lo que evidencia la dimensión regional de esta crisis. Panamá rechaza categóricamente los ataques contra la población civil, así como la infraestructura civil, incluidos centros de salud y personal médico que siguen cobrando vidas y agravando el sufrimiento de la población. Señor presidente, Panamá condena en los términos más enérgicos las muertes de cascos azules de la Fuerza Provisional de las Naciones Unidas en el Líbano, UNIFIL, tras los ataques ocurridos recientemente entre ellos la explosión de un proyectil contra una posición de la misión en el sur del Líbano, así como las heridas graves sufridas por otros miembros del contingente que reflejan el deterioro de las condiciones de seguridad sobre el terreno. Panamá expresa sus más sinceras condolencias a las familias de los cascos azules que han perdido la vida, en particular al contingente de Indonesia, así como al Estado al que pertenecen, y extiende su plena solidaridad al personal de la UNIFIL. Este trágico incidente se suma a otros recientes, incluido aquel en el que 3 cascos azules del contingente de Ghana resultaron heridos, evidenciando un patrón preocupante de riesgos crecientes para el personal de mantenimiento de la paz y constituyen graves violencias del derecho internacional, incluido el derecho internacional humanitario, de la resolución 1701, así como de las normas fundamentales que protegen al personal de las Naciones Unidas y su carácter inviolable. Es imperativo que estos hechos sean investigados y que haya rendición de cuentas para que la impunidad no sea el amparo de acciones como esta en el presente y en el futuro. Como ha señalado la propia UNIFIL, nadie debería perder la vida sirviendo a la causa de la paz. Panamá reafirma su pleno apoyo a la labor de UNIFIL, cuya presencia sigue siendo indispensable para reducir tensiones, apoyar el despliegue del ejército libanés y preservar la estabilidad a lo largo de la línea azul. Presidente, Panamá reitera su firme respaldo y reconocimiento a la soberanía, a la integridad territorial, unidad e independencia política del Estado libanés y a su gobierno e instituciones, en particular de las Fuerzas Armadas libanesas, para fortalecer la autoridad del Estado en todo su territorio y poder avanzar hacia el principio de que el monopolio del uso legítimo de la fuerza y de las armas corresponda exclusivamente al Estado, en línea con la resolución 1701. Ante esta grave situación, reiteramos el llamado a las partes a retomar el acuerdo de cese de hostilidades del 26 de noviembre de 2024 y a cumplir plenamente con sus obligaciones en virtud del derecho internacional. Exhortamos a aprovechar la oportunidad para reanudar el diálogo y la negociación ofrecidas por el gobierno de Líbano a Israel. No existe una solución militar a esta crisis. La plena implementación de la resolución 1701 sigue siendo el marco fundamental para garantizar la estabilidad a lo largo de la línea azul y avanzar hacia una solución duradera. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Panama for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
主席，我感谢拉克鲁瓦副秘书长、弗莱彻副秘书长和基亚利助理秘书长的通报。感谢你应法国、印度尼西亚要求召开此次紧急会议。欢迎黎巴嫩代表出席今天的会议。当前中东局势紧张升级，外溢影响不断蔓延。中东战事的是非曲直十分清楚。当务之急是积极劝和促谈，抓住和平机会，推动战火平息。黎以局势升温以来，敌对行动轮番升级，造成严重人员伤亡和基础设施破坏。国际社会必须采取紧急行动，在冲突进一步失控前踩下刹车，早日恢复地区和平稳定。我讲3点。第一，实现停火止战是最紧迫的任务。以色列同真主党持续交火， 让地区人民深陷战争苦难。以色列不断升级军事进攻，已经造成1200多人丧生。近日，以色列宣布将扩大在黎巴嫩的地面行动，扩张所谓缓冲区，战事进一步长期化、升级化的危险趋势令人担忧。黎巴嫩不能成为另一个加沙，国际社会绝不能允许加沙的惨剧再次上演。中方呼吁当事方立即停止敌对行动，推动局势缓和降温。以色列应立即从黎巴嫩全面撤军，尊重黎巴嫩的主权、安全和领土完整。第二，支持黎巴嫩国内稳定是重中之重。当前局势给黎巴嫩国内政治、经济、人道局势等造成严重冲击。我们欢迎黎巴嫩政府推进对国家管控的努力，支持黎巴嫩国内各方积极开展政治对话，妥善化解分歧。在以色列猛烈炮火和大规模强制疏散令下，黎巴嫩人道形势加速恶化，120多万人被迫逃离家园，流离失所。国际社会应加大对黎巴嫩的紧急援助力度，支持黎巴嫩政府稳定国内局势，保障基本民生，缓解人道挑战。第三，联黎部队安全是不容挑衅的底线。近日，联黎部队安全多次受到交火影响，并发生2起致命性袭击事件，造成3名维和人员死亡和多人受伤。中方强烈谴责针对联黎部队的袭击，对印尼维和人员遇袭身亡表示深切哀悼，并向伤者表示慰问。任何蓄意攻击联合国维和人员的行为，都严重违反国际人道法和安理会第1701号决议，绝对不能接受，必须立即停止。我们高度赞赏联黎部队冒着战火威胁坚守岗位，敦促当事方采取切实措施，保障联黎部队安全和行动自由，对所有袭击维和人员事件进行严肃调查追责。中方尊重黎巴嫩的主权、安全和领土完整，愿同国际社会一道，为推动平息黎以局势、恢复黎巴嫩和中东地区和平稳定做出不懈努力。谢谢主席。
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин председатель, признательный заместителям генерального секретаря Жан-Пьеру Лакруа и Тому Флетчеру, а также помощнику генерального секретаря Халиду Хьяри за обстоятельные доклады по ситуации в Ливане. И весьма тревожные также. Непрекращающаяся уже месяц, почти месяц, эскалация военных действий на голубой линии и шире затрагивает не только дружественный нам ливанский народ, но и дислоцированных на юге страны миротворцев временных сил ООН в Ливане. Наглядное и одновременно трагическое тому подтверждение, произошедшее за последние 48 часов, гибель 3 сотрудников в СООН и ранение еще нескольких военнослужащих. Выражаем искреннее соболезнование семьям погибших и желаем скорейшего выздоровления пострадавшим миротворцам. Насколько можно судить по комментариям руководства Всемирной организации и временных сил, расследование обстоятельств произошедшего на юге Ливана продолжается. Рассчитываем на оперативное получение от секретариата ООН всей полноты информации, в том числе об исполнителях этих вопиющих атак. Россия решительно осуждает все нападения на контингент СООН, кем бы они ни осуществлялись. Поддерживаем призывы генерального секретаря Гутерреша к сторонам конфликта соблюдать нормы международного права и обеспечить гарантии безопасности голубых касок. Твердо исходим из необходимости скорейшего прекращения огня в Ливано-Израильском приграничье. Иначе резонансные вспышки насилия на юге Ливана станут не последними фатальными инцидентами с сотрудниками ООН. Господин председатель, еще одной опасной тенденцией последних дней стала целенаправленная охота Цахал на представителей СМИ, освещающих события на земле в зоне Ливано-израильского противостояния. По поступающей информации, 28 марта в результате удара израильского беспилотника в районе города Джиазии были убиты известный журналист телеканала Аль-Манар Али Шуеб, а также его коллега из канала Аль-Маидин Фатима и Мухаммед Фатуни. Ранее, 19 марта, на юге Ливана в результате ракетной атаки ВВС Израиля ранения получили сотрудники съемочной группы телеканала Russia Today. Прицельный удар был нанесен в непосредственной близости от места проведения съемок, где никаких военных объектов не было, что наглядно подтверждают попавшие в объектив оператора кадры детонации боеприпасов. Рассматриваем подобные действия израильской стороны и ее военных как грубое нарушение международного права и сознательное препятствие работе сотрудников СМИ. Требуем тщательного расследования данного инцидента властями Израиля, привлечения виновных к ответственности и недопущения подобных нападений в будущем. Господин председатель, Израиль нанес новый мощный воздушный удар по Бейруту. Хотел бы вновь напомнить про первопричины нынешнего обострения ливано-израильской конфронтации. Именно агрессия Вашингтона и Западного Иерусалима против Ирана стала спусковым крючком для общего обрушения хрупкой стабильности на Ближнем Востоке. К сожалению, многие из членов Совета Безопасности упорно молчат об этом и не оставляют попыток возложить всю ответственность исключительно на ливанское сопротивление, выставляя его как главного виновника всплеска насилия вдоль голубой линии. Одновременно замалчиваются многочисленные нарушения Израилем режима прекращения огня, имевшие место на протяжении последних 1,5 лет. Такой однобокий подход ряда государств, включая непосредственно участников нынешней большой региональной войны, явно не способствует нормализации обстановки в регионе и, напротив, подстегивает противоборствующие стороны к эскалации конфронтации. В результате мы наблюдаем продолжающийся рост жертв среди мирного населения и масштабное разрушение гражданской инфраструктуры. В одном только Ливане со 2 марта в результате действий Цахал погибло почти 1500 человек, число раненых приближается к 4000, более миллиона ливанцев стали внутренне перемещенными лицами. Обыденной практикой становятся удары Израиля по медицинским учреждениям Арабской Республики. На этом фоне из Западного Иерусалима все сильнее звучит воинственная риторика, в том числе приказы премьер-министра Биньямина Нетаньяху расширить так называемую зону безопасности на юге Ливана, незаконно находящейся под контролем Цахал. Господин председатель, подтверждаем приверженность нашей страны суверенитету и территориальной целостности Ливанской Республики. Призываем руководство Израиля отказаться от исключительно силовых методов устранения своих законных озабоченностей в сфере безопасности, вывести подразделения армии с оккупированной территории и вернуться на путь дипломатии. Ключевым ориентиром для сторон должно оставаться неукоснительное следование своим обязательствам согласно резолюции Совета 1701 и другим профильным решениям Совета, в том числе касающимся параметров деятельности в СООН, которые продолжают, вопреки угрозам безопасности, оставаться на своих позициях и ценой своей жизни выполнять вверенный им Советом Безопасности мандат по стабилизации обстановки в регионе. Благодарю вас.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. For his statement, I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Señor presidente, agradezco a la presidencia por la organización de esta reunión y al señor Jean-Pierre Lacroix, secretario general adjunto de Operaciones de Paz, al señor Khaled Hiari, secretario general adjunto para el Medio Oriente, y al señor Tom Fletcher, secretario general adjunto para Asuntos Humanitarios, por sus presentaciones. Señor presidente, los reportes oficiales y la información reciente confirman un deterioro alarmante de la situación de seguridad y humanitaria en el Líbano. En nuestra última intervención, mi delegación advirtió que la situación exigía una respuesta internacional urgente para evitar precisamente el escenario que hoy enfrentamos. Frente a este panorama, Colombia reitera su llamado a todas las partes a respetar plenamente el derecho internacional, incluidas las disposiciones de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, el derecho internacional humanitario y las resoluciones pertinentes del Consejo de Seguridad, en particular la resolución 1701. No puede haber solución sostenible sin apego a estos marcos. Por ello es imperativo retomar las vías pacíficas de solución de controversias y poner fin al uso de la fuerza, incluyendo a la ocupación ilegal del territorio libanés por parte de Israel. La crisis humanitaria que vive hoy el Líbano no es ajena a la omisión y a la violación sistemática de estos principios. Mi delegación condena, por tanto, los reiterados ataques contra la infraestructura civil, las instalaciones sanitarias y el desplazamiento forzado derivados de las acciones armadas israelíes, así como las incursiones terrestres contrarias a las disposiciones de la resolución 1701. Colombia hace un llamado al cese de todas las acciones incompatibles con la obligación de proteger a los civiles y a que se garantice el apoyo internacional necesario, incluida una financiación suficiente y sostenible para prestar asistencia sobre el terreno y mitigar el impacto de las hostilidades sobre la población civil. Mi delegación subraya igualmente que debe garantizarse la rendición de cuentas de los responsables, pues solo con justicia se evita el recrudecimiento de la violencia. En paralelo, la seguridad del personal de la organización y la inviolabilidad de sus instalaciones deben ser plenamente garantizados en todo momento por todas las partes. Colombia expresa sus condolencias a las víctimas y sus familias, así como al gobierno de Indonesia. A ellos, a sus familias y a todos los miembros de la organización, especialmente a los funcionarios en el terreno, les agradecemos por sus servicios a la causa de la paz. Señor presidente, Colombia reitera su solidaridad con el pueblo libanés. Del mismo modo, subraya que el respeto por la soberanía, la independencia política y la integridad territorial del Líbano no son negociables. En este contexto, mi delegación acoge con beneplácito las decisiones adoptadas por el gobierno libanés en las últimas semanas con miras a contener los efectos de la escalada de hostilidades y avanzar en la recuperación del monopolio legítimo de las armas. Al mismo tiempo, hace un llamado a todas las partes para que cesen toda acción que obstaculice esos esfuerzos. Señor presidente, la situación actual en el Líbano no se desarrolla en el vacío. Abordar la crisis humanitaria sin claridad sobre las causas que la alimentan o procurar el cese de los enfrentamientos sin tomar en consideración las dinámicas regionales más amplias no solo constituye un enfoque incompleto, sino también una respuesta insuficiente frente a la gravedad de este momento. Colombia considera que difícilmente el Consejo podrá cumplir cabalmente con su responsabilidad mientras siga recurriendo a aproximaciones parciales y selectivas para abordar una crisis de esta magnitud. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
السيد الرئيس، أود أن أغتنم هذه الفرصة ونحن نعقد آخر اجتماع للمجلس لشهر مارس لنتقدم بالشكر إلى دولة الرئاسة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية على إدارتها لأعمال المجلس بكفاءة واقتدار خلال هذا الشهر. كما نتوجه بالشكر أيضا إلى الجمهورية الفرنسية على استجابتها السريعة للتصعيدات الخطيرة في جنوب لبنان وطلبها عقد هذا الاجتماع. ونثمن أيضا الإحاطات الوافية المقدمة من كل من وكيل الأمين العام لعمليات السلام جون بيير لاكوا والأمين العام المساعد للشرق الأوسط وآسيا خالد الخياري، ووكيل الأمين العام للشؤون الإنسانية ومنسق الإغاثة في حالات الطوارئ بمكتب تنسيق الشؤون الإنسانية توم فليتشر، على ما قدموه من وصف دقيق حول الأوضاع في لبنان. وأرحب كذلك بمشاركة جميع المندوبين الدائمين في جلسة اليوم. السيد الرئيس، تدين مملكة البحرين بشدة الهجوم الذي تعرضت له قوة الأمم المتحدة المؤقتة في لبنان اليونيفيل، والذي أسفر عن مقتل 3 من عناصرها وإصابة 5 آخرون. وتؤكد أن استهداف قوات حفظ السلام يمثل انتهاكا صارخا للقانون الدولي ولقرارات مجلس الأمن. كما تتقدم المملكة بخالص التعازي والمواساة إلى أسر الضحايا وإلى حكومة جمهورية إندونيسيا وإلى الأمم المتحدة مع التمنيات بالشفاء العاجل للمصابين. وتؤكد المملكة أن ضمان أمن وسلامة قوات حفظ السلام مسؤولية تقع على عاتق جميع الأطراف، وتشدد على ضرورة احترام ولايتها وتمكينها من أداء مهامها دون عوائق. السيد الرئيس، تشدد مملكة البحرين على أهمية تحييد لبنان عن الصراعات الإقليمية ورفض أي محاولات لزجه في أترونها. كما تجدد المملكة موقفها الثابت في دعم سيادة الجمهورية اللبنانية الشقيقة ووحدتها وسلامة أراضيها، وضرورة تمكين مؤسسات الدولة اللبنانية من بسط سلطتها الكاملة على جميع أراضيها بما يصون الأمن والاستقرار الوطني ويحقق تطلعات الشعب اللبناني الشقيق. وفي هذا الإطار تثمن المملكة الخطوات التي اتخذتها الحكومة اللبنانية مؤخرا، والتي تعكس جدية واضحة في العمل على حصر السلاح بيد الدولة ومؤسساتها الشرعية، بما في ذلك الإجراءات المتعلقة بنزع السلاح ممن يطلق على نفسه حزب الله. وتعرب المملكة كذلك عن تقديرها لموقف الحكومة اللبنانية الصريح في رفض وإدانة الهجمات التي نفذها الحزب لما تمثله من تهديد لاستقرار لبنان وتصعيد خطير في المنطقة، إلى جانب سعيها لفرض الحظر الفوري لكافة النشاطات الأمنية والعسكرية المرتبطة به. ونرحب أيضا بإعلان القيادة اللبنانية نيتها الانخراط في مفاوضات مع إسرائيل برعاية دولية للتوصل إلى وقف فوري لإطلاق النار، وهو توجه يعكس مسؤولية وطنية وحرصا على تجنيب لبنان المزيد من التصعيد. السيد الرئيس، وفي هذا السياق تدين مملكة البحرين أي تصعيد من شأنه أن يؤدي إلى توسيع رقعة المواجهات وتحويلها إلى صراع إقليمي شامل، وأي خروقات لاتفاق وقف إطلاق النار، كما تدين التصريحات الإسرائيلية ذات الطابع التوسعي، وتحذر من مخاطر أي توغلات برية قد تمس سيادة الأراضي اللبنانية أو تهدد أمنها وسلامتها وتتسبب في سقوط ضحايا مدنيين وتفاقم الأوضاع الإنسانية، فضلا عن موجات نزوح واسعة لما لذلك من انعكاسات خطيرة على الاستقرار الإقليمي. وتؤكد المملكة في هذا السياق ضرورة الالتزام الكامل بأحكام القانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني، لا سيما ما يتعلق بحماية المدنيين والبنية التحتية المدنية وضمان وصول المساعدات الإنسانية دون عوائق. السيد الرئيس، تؤكد مملكة البحرين أن دعم الجيش اللبناني وقوى الأمن الداخلي وتعزيز قدراتهما يظل حجر الزاوية في الحفاظ على استقرار لبنان وصون سيادته وأمنه، وهو ما يستوجب تضافر الجهود الدولية لتقديم الدعم اللازم لهما بما يمكنهما من أداء مهامهما بكفاءة، لا سيما في جنوب لبنان. وختاما، تؤكد مملكة البحرين أن الحفاظ على وحدة لبنان واستقراره وسيادته مسؤولية جماعية، وتدعو جميع الأطراف إلى الالتزام بالقرارات الدولية ذات الصلة، وعلى رأسها قرار مجلس الأمن 1701 لعام 2006 والعمل بشكل عاجل على تثبيت وقف إطلاق النار ومنع المزيد من التصعيد. وشكرا.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I thank USG Lacroix, ASG Chiari, and USG Fletcher for briefing us today. The United Kingdom strongly condemns the recent attacks on UNIFIL, including those which caused the deaths of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers and injured Polish peacekeepers. Our thoughts are with the families of the deceased and with the injured. Such attacks are unacceptable. We urge all parties to ensure the safety and security of UNIFIL personnel and premises in accordance with international law. I thank all peacekeepers serving in Lebanon for their dedication, bravery, and professionalism. Many of us here had the opportunity to meet them during our visit to Lebanon in December. President, the UK is clear in its condemnation of Hezbollah's decision to join Iran's attacks against Israel. Hezbollah's attacks on Israel, including civilian communities south of the Blue Line, must cease immediately. The actions of this proscribed terrorist group, at the instigation of the Iranian regime, are once again drawing the people of Lebanon into a conflict they do not want and which is not in their interests. I commend the Lebanese government's decision to ban all Hezbollah military activity and initiate a plan to bring all weapons under state control. We will continue to support the Lebanese armed forces as they undertake this task, as Lebanon's sole legitimate defender. However, Israel's decision to expand its ground operations further into Lebanon undermines this work and threatens Lebanon's sovereignty. Strikes on Lebanese armed forces positions are also deeply concerning. President, as we've heard here, the conflict is causing a deepening crisis with dire consequences for civilians. The humanitarian toll is staggering. More than 1 million people have been forced from their homes, with women and children facing the greatest risks. Among the displaced are over 12,000 pregnant women, many struggling to access essential health care. At least 121 children have been killed, and countless others are enduring the trauma of violence, loss, and upheaval. Attacks impacting healthcare facilities have intensified, with more than 50 health workers killed to date. This is unacceptable. All parties to the conflict must uphold international humanitarian law. Civilians and critical infrastructure must be protected and humanitarian access enabled. The United Kingdom has provided $12 million in support of the government of Lebanon's efforts to reach vulnerable communities. We stand with those working tirelessly to protect civilians and deliver life-saving assistance. And finally, President, we support the urgent need for direct negotiations between the governments of Israel and Lebanon. This is the only path towards lasting peace and security for people both sides of the Blue Line. Both Israel and Lebanon want to see an end to Hezbollah's ability to threaten the region. Further expansion of this conflict will only repeat the cycle of violence across the Blue Line and drag the region further into crisis. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement. I will now give a statement in my capacity as a representative of the United States. And colleagues, I too thank you. I thank our briefers for their thorough updates, and I thank France for convening this urgent meeting. We too mourn the loss of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers on March 29th and 30th, and we do extend our heartfelt condolences to their families, to their loved ones. And colleagues, we honor their sacrifice in the service of international peace and security. We also wish a full and swift recovery to the other UNIFIL peacekeepers who were injured. Colleagues, one of those that we mourn is Private First Class Ramadan. Just 28 years old, Private Ramadan was still at the dawn of his career. His company was due to return very soon to Indonesia, where the young husband and father would be reunited with his 2-year-old daughter, Shania. His last communication with his family was a simple red heart, an emoji. I've worked personally with many junior soldiers like him, and I think the Indonesian press got it right from everything that I've read about him when they called him a, quote, young warrior in training. But unfortunately, this young warrior died while keeping the peace. He was a young father, a young soldier, thousands of miles from home, who trusted that this council would deploy him where he would be most effective. Colleagues, peacekeepers endure exceptional dangers to prevent conflict and protect civilians. Their safety and security must be respected by all parties at all times. And that is why I ask this council and the watching world to pause and to reserve judgment until the United Nations can fully investigate and fully assess the circumstances of these tragic incidences, even as we share in the shock and sorrow of this loss. I say again, the media, the world watching, and this council should pause and allow the United Nations to fully investigate and assess the circumstances of these incidences. Again, on a personal note, as a soldier, now turned diplomat, that has commanded coalition troops, we all know the dangers that exist when we accept these missions. But in contrast here, the peacekeepers that this body sends to conflict zones are often surprised by the very real perils that they face. Countries like Indonesia send their sons and daughters to support the UN mission of peace. They're not sending them to fight a war. This council owes them condolences, but we also owe them a wise approach to peacekeeping that recognizes that terrorists have no respect for this council. Terrorists have no respect for the norms of international law. Colleagues, we all recognize that the suffering in this region is immense and has gone on for far too long. Parents, children, and grandparents, whether Israeli or Lebanese, whether civilians or UN peacekeepers, they should not face the daily dangers caused by Iranian-backed terrorists who have long afflicted both Israel and Lebanon. The people in this region deserve a different future, one defined by security and economic opportunity and normal life, not by rockets, tunnels, and the constant threat of escalation and retaliation. We must support the government of Lebanon and the Lebanese armed forces as they exercise sovereignty, and we've heard a lot of talk about sovereignty today, but as they exercise sovereignty, the duly elected government of Lebanon, over all of Lebanon's territory and beat back Hezbollah, a group that hides behind civilians while threatening their neighbors, a terrorist group that has a long history of hiding weapons, fighters, and caches of rockets in schools and hospitals and civilian homes. Hezbollah also has a long history of attacking peacekeepers and of firing on Israeli civilians from proximity of UNIFIL and peacekeeping positions, inviting retaliation for their own propaganda aims. Colleagues, since 1978, over 300 UNIFIL peacekeepers have been killed and this is in this mission, and this is why this council must think very carefully about the effectiveness of this effort. We can help refocus international efforts on supporting Lebanese state institutions reducing risk to peacekeepers, and pressing Hezbollah and Iran to cease their destabilizing activities. We, the United States, will continue to work with Council members, regional partners, troop-contributing countries, and the parties on the ground to reduce tensions, support Lebanon's sovereignty, and make a better future for the Lebanese people. I thank you. I will resume my duties as President of the Council, and under Rule 37, I invite the representative of Lebanon. I give the floor to the representative of Lebanon.
سيد الرئيس، يدين لبنان بشكل قاطع ولا لبس فيه ما تتعرض له اليونيفيل من اعتداءات تهدد أمن وسلامة بعثتها وعناصرها، ويشدد على ضرورة الاحترام الكامل لمهامها من جميع الأطراف، وضمان سلامتها وأمنها وحرمة مقراتها وحرية تنقلها، وكل ما من شأنه تسهيل أدائها لمهامها بموجب القانون الدولي وقرارات مجلس الأمن ذات الصلة. إن الاعتداءات التي يتعرض لها حفظة السلام هي اعتداءات على هذا المجلس وتقويض لسمعته ومصداقيته أمام شعوب العالم أجمع. فهذه الأعمال البربرية وغير المسؤولة يجب أن تتوقف أيا تكن الجهة المسؤولة عنها، وعلى هذا المجلس مسؤولية قانونية وأخلاقية في تحديد المسؤولين عنها ومحاسبتهم. ولعله من الواجب القول أن هذه القوة والدول المساهمة فيها جسدت أرقى معاني التضحية ماضيا وحاضرا. فمن منا لا يستذكر استهداف إسرائيل المتعمد لمقر اليونيفيل في بلدة قانا عام 1996 وتهديدها والطلب منها مغادرة منطقة عملياتها عام 2024. واليوم نجتمع إثر مقتل 3 جنود من الكتيبة الإندونيسية وإصابة آخرين أحدهم يحمل الجنسية البولندية، علما أنه سبق ذلك استهداف الكتيبتين الغانية والنيبالية. سيد الرئيس، باسم حكومة لبنان أتقدم بالتعازي لإندونيسيا حكومة وشعبا ولعائلات الجنود، ونتمنى الشفاء العاجل للمصابين، ونثني على تضحيات الكتيبة الإندونيسية وجميع القوات المشاركة في القوة لما قدموه في سبيل صون الأمن والاستقرار في لبنان. ونجدد اليوم تمسك لبنان باليونيفيل أكثر من أي وقت مضى، ونشدد على أهمية الحفاظ على وحدة القوات المساهمة في اليونيفيل وضمان استمرار مشاركتها. ولا يفوتنا أن نجدد امتناننا لقائد القوة وجميع العاملين فيها. سيد الرئيس، إن الأثمان التي يدفعها اللبنانيون بسبب هذا الصراع ثقيلة ومرهقة، وهم أي اللبنانيين لم يختاروا هذه الحرب بل فرضت عليهم. فهناك إسرائيل التي لم تحترم يوما إعلان وقف الأعمال العدائية واستمرت بانتهاكاتها لسيادة لبنان وسلامته الإقليمية واستهدافها المتعمد للمدنيين والأعيان المدنية، وحزب الله الذي قرر منفردا خوض حرب في وقت كانت فيه الحكومة اللبنانية تبدي انفتاحا على حوار كان من المفترض أن يفضي إلى حلول سياسية مستدامة ويوفر إطارا لمعالجة المسائل العالقة. السيد الرئيس، تتجلى الكارثة الإنسانية مع استمرار الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية التي أودت حتى اليوم بحياة 1250 لبناني وجرح 3700 شخص، من بينهم أطفال ونساء ومسعفين وعمال إغاثة وصحفيين، في استهدافات مباشرة تشكل خرقا فاضحا للقانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني واتفاقيات جنيف. وقد أدت هذه الاعتداءات إلى نزوح أكثر من 1,200,000 لبناني خارج مدنهم وقراهم في عملية تهجير جماعي. ولا تزال إسرائيل تواصل هدم القرى والبلدات وتنفيذ توغلات واسعة داخل الأراضي اللبنانية، مصحوبة بدعوات لإنشاء أحزمة أمنية ومناطق عازلة، على وقع تهديدات خطيرة ضد سيادة لبنان وسلامة ووحدة أراضيه تشكل جميعا انتهاكا فاضحا للقانون الدولي ولميثاق الأمم المتحدة والفقه القضائي لمحكمة العدل الدولية. وهنا نذكر بمحتوى الرسالة المتطابقة التي وجهناها إليكم يوم أمس حول تصريحات وزيري الدفاع والمالية الإسرائيليين بشأن عزم الجيش الإسرائيلي احتلال جنوب لبنان حتى نهر الليطاني، واعتبار الحدود الإسرائيلية الجديدة عند مجرى النهر. فهذا المجلس مدعو إلى التحرك فورا وإدانة هذه التصريحات بشكل واضح وصريح، واتخاذ الإجراءات اللازمة لإلزام إسرائيل بوقف توغلاتها وتهديداتها لوحدة أراضي لبنان واستقلاله السياسي، وسحب قواتها إلى الحدود المعترف بها دوليا، والامتثال للميثاق والقرارات الدولية ذات الصلة ممن فيها القرار 1701 وإعلان وقف الأعمال العدائية. السيد الرئيس، في السياق عينه لا يفوتنا أن ندين بأشد العبارات تهديدات الحرس الثوري الإيراني باستهدافات الجامعات الأمريكية في الشرق الأوسط، ما دفع بالجامعة الأمريكية في بيروت والجامعة اللبنانية الأمريكية إلى إخلاء المباني الجامعية وتعليم طلابهم عن بعد. ندعو إيران التي لا تكف عن الدعوة عبر هذا المجلس الموقر إلى ضرورة الاحترام سيادة الدول وعدم التدخل في شؤونها الداخلية، إلى احترام سيادة لبنان وقراراته السيادية ووقف تدخلها في شؤونه الداخلية. السيد الرئيس، لبنان وشعبه أرادا إعادة بناء الدولة ومؤسساتها والقيام بالإصلاحات المطلوبة، وكانت الحكومة قد بدأت بالفعل خوض هذا المسار الذي تلازم مع خطوات ملموسة وجدية لإعادة بسط سلطة الدولة وسيطرتها على امتداد الوطن وحصر السلاح بسلطاتها الشرعية. ولأنها أيقنت أن الدول لا تعيش بعزلة، فقد قررت الحكومة الانفتاح على محيطها، انفتاح مبدئي قائم على حفظ الحقوق وإيمان بأن الحلول المستدامة لا تتحقق بالقوة بل بالطرق السلمية. في المقابل دأبت إسرائيل على تقويض مصداقية الحكومة من خلال انتهاكاتها المستمرة وتهديداتها الخطيرة بالاحتلال وضربها بعرض الحائط بميثاق الأمم المتحدة والقانون الدولي الإنساني. والسؤال الذي يطرح نفسه اليوم: هل تحقق لإسرائيل الأمن بعد احتلالها لبنان في العام 1978؟ هل يمكن أن يتحقق أي أمن أو استقرار من خلال الحلول العسكرية ومن دون مفاوضات؟ لقد علمنا التاريخ السيد الرئيس، ومن المفترض أن تتعلم إسرائيل أيضا، أن الأمن والاستقرار الدائمين والسلام المستدام لن يتحققا من خلال الحروب الطويلة أو الصراعات المتمادية أو الاحتلال. لقد حان الوقت لاستخلاص الدروس من الماضي مرة واحدة إلى الأبد. فالحل الدبلوماسي وحده قادر على تحقيق الأمن والاستقرار الدائمين وفي النهاية السلام العادل. المبادرات الدبلوماسية موجودة بالفعل على الطاولة، وقد حان الوقت لاستغلالها، فليتوقف العنف الآن. هذه مسؤوليتكم وواجبكم، فكل يوم يمضي على هذا الصراع يقوض مصداقيتكم ومصداقية الأمم المتحدة ككل. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to thank you and your team for presiding over the Council during this month. I would also like to thank USG Lacroix and ASG Chiari for the briefing. Mr. President, Israel extends its deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of the United Nations peacekeepers who lost their lives. We honor their service and recognize the risks they take every day in carrying out their mandate. Regarding the attack that took place yesterday, March 30th, we can confirm today that UNIFIL forces were hit by Hezbollah explosive devices in an incident near Bani Hayan. In addition, the shelling of the UNIFIL position near Adshit al-Qasar on the 29th of March, in which UNIFIL peacekeepers were tragically killed, was carried out by Hezbollah. The IDF did not fire in the close vicinity of the position. The situation is complex. It is changing quickly, and it is dangerous. But one thing is very clear. This did not happen in a vacuum. Israel did not choose this conflict. Hezbollah did, when it began firing on our communities, claiming to avenge the death of the Iranian regime's supreme leader. This is taking place in an environment shaped by ongoing Hezbollah attacks against Israel. And you know, it started in the 2nd of March. Hezbollah has carried out coordinated attacks against Israeli civilians acting at the direction of Tehran. More than 5,000 rockets, missiles, and drones have been fired at our people. Many of these attacks have been launched from areas south of the Litani River. You know the consequences. People have to hide, go to shelters. Same communities that had to displace over 18 months are doing it again. These are violations of Resolution 1701 and 1559. Hezbollah is deeply embedded across southern Lebanon. It operates from villages, it launches attacks from civilian areas, it positions itself close to UNIFIL forces. This is not by accident. It's a deliberate strategy. They choose where to put the launchers. Hezbollah embeds weapons, command centers, and launch sites within civilian areas. Let me show you only one example. We have hundreds of examples. This map shows Hezbollah launch sites operating directly next to a UNIFIL position. That's UNIFIL position in the yellow, and the red dots, the launch site. It shows 4 Hezbollah launches toward Israel on the 9th, 10th, and 11th of March, near Hania, right next to UNIFIL position 510. And we have hundreds of examples where they place the launchers. They put UNIFIL in the line of fire, in the middle. This is not a coincidence. Israel is coordinating closely with UNIFIL to reduce risk. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is exploiting their presence. On the 22nd of March, Israel sent a formal letter to UNIFIL warning. The head of the Northern Command sent that letter directly to UNIFIL, warning that the vicinity of the Janbat area was dangerous. We saw it coming, unfortunately. And we made clear that Hezbollah was deliberately operating near UN positions and placing them in the direct line of fire. We notified UNIFIL so they would be aware of this risk and take precautions. And let me quote directly what we wrote. Hezbollah is exploiting the presence of the United Nations positions in a manner that endangers UNIFIL personnel. We asked for temporary repositioning, not to escalate, but to protect. Israel has maintained continuous contact with UNIFIL, with UN headquarters, and with troop-contributing countries. We have urged forces to remain in protected bases and take shelter, because we are trying to reduce risk. Mr. President, as I stressed earlier, we regret any incident in which UN personnel are harmed, but we cannot ignore the bigger picture. Hezbollah continues to violate UN Security Resolution 1701 and 1559. It acts as a proxy of Iran. Iran continues to fund, arm, and direct Hezbollah. We also need to be honest about the role of the Lebanese government. There have been statements, even today, important ones, but it's not enough. Action. Lebanon committed to disarm Hezbollah south of the Litani River. It committed to deploy its own forces in that area. It has done neither. And I listened carefully also to my colleague from France. You mentioned Iran, but you know, when it comes to Israel, you condemn, you demand action. But when Iran openly defies Lebanon's sovereign decision to expel the Iranian ambassador, All their responses are very measured, very diplomatic, very polite. When it comes to Israel, you don't, think about the diplomacy. So I ask, how come you took a decision to expel the ambassador last week? To expel the Iranian ambassador. The deadline has passed. As we speak, he is still in Beirut. The guest is no longer acting like a guest. He's acting like he owns the house. Can you imagine that you will get a request from a hosting country? You were all serving in many countries. You will be asked to move out. And you will tell the host country, no, I'm not leaving. I have different orders from my capital, from Tehran, and I'm staying now. How can it happen? At the same time, Hezbollah ministers remain part of the government, and attacks continue to be launched from areas the Lebanese army says it controls, including south of the Litani River. The gap between words and reality is a problem. Lebanon has not taken sufficient action to address Hezbollah's military presence. Lebanon needs to take real action. Until that happens, no one is safe. No one. Not in northern Israel, not in Lebanon, not in UNIFIL bases. We are paying a heavy price. Last night, 4 Israeli soldiers fell in southern Lebanon. We remember them, we honor them. Israel will not accept attacks against its citizens, and we will take the necessary measures to defend them in accordance with the international law. Let me be clear. We have no desire, and I'm telling to my colleague from Lebanon, we have no desire to remain or operate in Lebanon. Our goal is to protect our communities and to push the threat away from our border. Mr. President, this is what happens when a terrorist group turns an entire region into a battlefield. When rockets are launched from villages, when weapons are hidden among civilians, when international forces are placed in the middle of it all. So let me be clear. If Hezbollah continues, the danger continues. If Hezbollah remains armed, the threat remains. Calls for de-escalation that ignore what is happening on the ground, the rockets, the attacks, the ongoing threat, will not solve this. We call on this Council to act. First, unequivocally condemn Hezbollah for its grave violations and designate it for what it is, a terrorist organization. Second, demand that the Lebanese authorities fulfill their obligations, disarm Hezbollah, and ensure full compliance with UN security resolutions. And third, address Iran's role as a threat to international peace and security and hold it accountable for the continued transfer of weapons and funding to Hezbollah. When others fail, Israel act. We will do whatever is necessary to protect our people. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Indonesia.
Madam President, thank you for convening this urgent meeting. With France, Indonesia requested this meeting as a testament of Indonesia's long-standing commitment and continued contribution to peacekeeping operations since 1957. I also thank the briefers, USG Lacroix, ISG Harry, and USG Fletcher. I should also like to thank you, Madam President, for giving me the floor to express the sense of grief, anger, and frustration of over 285 million people of Indonesia. I am sure that this sense of grief, anger, and frustration is widely shared by the people of the world. I am heartened by the pouring of expression of condolences, support, and solidarity from the members of this Council and the wider international community. Let me begin by honoring the memory of the fallen soldiers of peace by calling their names in this august chamber. Zulmi Aditya Iskandar, Major, Infantry, 33 years young. Muhammad Nur Ikhwan, First Sergeant, 25 years young. Fahrizal Ramadan, Corporal, 27 years young. Corporal Fahrizal lost his life serving his duty in our post in Ashid Al-Quzair. Major Zulmi and First Sergeant Muhammad lost their lives in the attack to their convoy, providing logistical supports in Bani Hayyan. We cannot accept these killings of peacekeepers. This is a grave loss to Indonesia. This is also a grave loss to all of us, to the United Nations, to this Council, and to every community that looks to peacekeepers as symbols of hope and peace. Further, the attacks injured 5 other peacekeepers: Captain Sultan Wiryan Maulana, Corporal Riko Pramudia, Corporal Arif Kurniawan, Corporal Bayu Prakoso, Cadet Private Denny Rianto. These peacekeepers fell and wounded while carrying out a mandate entrusted to them by this very Council. Indonesia condemns in the strongest terms these heinous attacks against those peacekeepers serving with the UNIFIL on the 29th and 30th of March 2026. Indonesia urges all relevant actors to ensure the prompt, safe, and dignified repatriation of the remains of the 3 deceased personnel and request the best possible medical treatment and comprehensive care for the 5 injured peacekeepers to ensure their full and swift recovery. Madam President, some detractors have argued that the fallen soldiers were positioned in a zone of active war. But this framing overlooks a fundamental question: who is responsible for creating and sustaining that zone of active hostilities? The current escalation did not arise in vacuum. It stems from repeated incursions by the Israeli military into the territory of Lebanon. Indonesia strongly condemns Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon, which constitute a serious violation against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. Indonesia continues to stand in solidarity with the government and the people of Lebanon. As hostilities in southern Lebanon escalates, attacks against UNIFIL peacekeepers have also increased in recent weeks. These repeated attacks are not mere incidents, but deliberate assaults aimed at undermining the UNIFIL and deterring its ability to fulfill the mandate of Resolution 1701. These attacks also represent a direct threat to international peace and security and may constitute war crimes under international law. We therefore demand an immediate, thorough, and transparent investigation. Let me be clear. We demand investigation by the United Nations, not excuses from Israel. We demand the Security Council to keep abreast of the investigation and to immediately follow up the results. We demand that the perpetrators must be held legally accountable. Immunity must not become the standard, and attacks against peacekeepers must not be repeated nor tolerated. We also demand a firm guarantee from all parties involved, including Israel, to uphold their obligations under international law, to immediately cease attacks and aggressive behavior that endanger UN personnel and property, and to refrain from any action that further escalates the hostilities. Madam President, the safety and security of peacekeepers must remain and continue to be our utmost priority. Amid escalating hostilities, the Council and the Secretary General must immediately implement emergency measures to ensure the full protection of UNIFIL personnel and assets. This include review of security arrangement protocols and activation of contingency and evacuation plans commensurate to the developments on the ground. We must leverage all political and diplomatic means to de-escalate this situation. The Security Council must reaffirm the foundational principles that guarantee the safety and security of UN peacekeepers. It is imperative for the Council and the wider international community to take immediate and decisive action to protect those who protect peace. We make these demands in deep reverence for our fallen peacekeepers, to whom Indonesia pays its highest respect for their ultimate sacrifice in the service of international peace and security. To this end, Indonesia remains committed to contribute to the maintenance of peace and security as our constitutional mandated. Now, we demand the Security Council to act and deliver. Today, the Security Council must speak up with a clear, strong, and unified voice to condemn the attacks against peacekeeping personnel. Today, the Security Council must reaffirm the obligations of all parties to ensure and guarantee the safety and security of peacekeepers. Today, the Security Council must take decisive action to prevent future hostilities and attacks against peacekeepers. No more attacks. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Indonesia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Poland.
Madam President, let me thank you for convening this important meeting upon the request of France and Indonesia. I would also like to thank the briefers for the comprehensive information on the situation on the ground. Madam President, Poland is deeply concerned by the increasing instability in Lebanon, which directly affects the safety of the civilian population as well as the UNIFIL personnel. As the result of recent attacks, 3 Indonesian peacekeepers have lost their lives, while others were injured, including a soldier from the Polish contingent. We extend our deepest condolences to Indonesia and the close ones of the fallen peacekeepers and wish the injured a swift recovery. Poland strongly condemns these incidents. Ensuring safety of peacekeepers must be a top priority for all parties involved. We expect the ongoing investigation to conclusively determine all the circumstances of these tragic developments. Madam President, we wish to point to the increasingly difficult situation of UNIFIL, marked by growing security threats, reduction of the operations capabilities due to the 15% cuts, and the lack of a clear plan for the termination of the mandated activities. These elements create uncertainty regarding UNIFIL's mode of operation in the future. We therefore call for development of clear operational guidelines for the implementation of Resolution 2790, enabling troop-contributing countries to align their planning while ensuring both the continued implementation of the mandate and the safety of soldiers remaining in Lebanon. Madam President, in a broader context, we call on all parties to refrain from any actions that would further escalate the situation and to return to the implementation of the ceasefire agreement, which was negotiated by the United States and France in November 2024, and to ensure the full implementation of the provisions of Resolution 9001. We are deeply concerned about the humanitarian situation of the civilian population. In response, Poland has delivered the first batch of humanitarian aid to Lebanon. Additionally, answering humanitarian appeals, we have made voluntary contributions to international Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. Further aid programs are currently being prepared. Madam President, we call all parties to urgently return to the ceasefire agreement and to fully respect Security Council Resolution 1701. Poland reaffirms its strong support for the mandate of UNIFIL in the southern Lebanon, and we commend the courage, professionalism, and steadfast commitment of UNIFIL peacekeepers in the fulfillment of their mandate. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Poland for the statement. And now the representative of France has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je serai extrêmement rapide à la suite des propos de notre collègue israélien. Je ne me livrerai pas à une comparaison des déclarations de la France concernant Israël et l'Iran, tout simplement parce qu'il ne me viendrait pas à l'esprit de comparer la nature des relations entre la France et Israël d'une part, la France et l'Iran d'autre part. Notre seul propos, c'est la volonté de désescalade, la volonté que soit respectée l'intégrité territoriale et la souveraineté du Liban par tous, et nous rappelons toujours la responsabilité écrasante de l'Iran et du Hezbollah dans le déclenchement de toutes ces opérations. Je vous remercie.
All right. I thank the representative of France for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. However, before adjourning this meeting, I would like to warmly thank the Secretariat of the Council for all the support they have given us this month. And I thank all the members of the Council for joining us in this bit of history and for lending us your support, and to the variety of voices from this seat, from the First Lady of the United States, to Ambassador Waltz, to myself, and to all the other ambassadors from USUN. As I gavel the presidency closed, as I speak also on behalf of everyone here at our mission, in wishing the delegation of Bahrain good luck for the month of April, but we know luck favors the prepared, so you're going to do very well. My thanks to everyone from the mission, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is closed.